This is my first time posting here or anywhere about this incident, so I apologize if details get a little bit confusing. I'll try my best to make it as concise as possible. This happened a few months ago to my friends and I. We're university students in Cape Town, South Africa, so when we aren't trying to just get through the semester, we like to let our habits get the better of us and go out for some drinks. On this night in particular, we had just finished what felt like an extra long day at university and decided to head to a bar about 5 minutes away from campus for some much-needed stress relief. The evening was actually going well, although a tad slow. It was enjoyable with everyone having a drink and getting a bit restless. Me being one of the more outgoing ones of the group, I suggested we head to the pool bar not far from where we were. Everyone agreed and we grabbed our stuff to go. We all jumped in my car and we got to the bar. Being a Thursday night though, parking was quite scarce. I finally managed to find a spot about a block away from the bar, but in this secluded side street. I should also mention that this bar is one of the sketchier parts of town. Normally though, it's quite safe due to the sheer amount of nightlife associated with being so close to a university. We walked to the bar and no one really felt uneasy, nor did anything happen to make us feel that way. It was quite surprising actually. And after a few hours of some pool and just relaxing about, we decided it was about time to grab some dinner before the restaurants closed, as being in South Africa meant that most restaurants, even fast food, closed really early at around 7 or 8 p.m. to comply with the curfew. We decided to stop at the pizza place below the bar to grab some food, before we all decided what the plan for the end of the night was. So, because our group was so large and the pizza place being so small, we decided to have those getting food go inside, while the others who didn't would just wait outside on the street. This was an easy decision, as the pizza place had a massive open window, so we could still all talk to each other. This is where things started getting a little bit weird though. While we were waiting for our friends inside the pizza place to come out, this massive white van pulled up past us and stopped. The driver wasn't a particularly intimidating looking dude. In fact, he was quite skinny and looked to be about average height with shoulder-length long blonde hair. A pretty standard looking dude, at least for the kind of area we were in. He called out to me and asked if I thought his van could fit in a parking spot just behind him. For perspective, this parking spot could probably fit like a small hatchback maybe. This dude was driving a full, long-sized panel van. This made me kind of uneasy, as I thought that as a driver of that sort of car, you should definitely know where your car can and cannot fit. This was one of those situations. I kindly explained to him that I didn't think it would even be worth attempting. He responded telling me that he had faith in his ability, and I should come stand behind the van to direct him. This gave me major red flags. After a few back and forths, he just pulled the emergency brake up and sat and stared at my friends and I for what felt like an eternity. He then thanked us suddenly and drove off. This sparked my friends to come outside from the pizza place, as they just saw what had happened and were very confused. We were all kind of weirded out, but thought nothing of it. Everyone just ate their pizza, and we tried to decide what the plan was for the last hour or two we have before the curfew cut things short. Most of us decided this is where the night was going to end, as we were all kind of weirded out by that guy in the van. A few others decided they were going to stay and just Uber home a little bit later in the evening. With our group number now cut down to 4, we decided to walk back to the car and just drive home. When we left the pizza place, this homeless person called out to us, insisting we had nothing to worry about with the guy in the van. This did not help anyone's nerves. We then decided to head to the car, but as soon as we turned the corner to approach the side street where it was parked, we saw that van man again. This time not looking quite so happy as he had seemed in his earlier encounter. I made a cheeky comment about him finally finding a parking spot he could fit in while we were walking past each other. He just stared at my friends and I, not breaking eye contact even when we passed him by. I turned around to see if he was still looking. He was. but as we turned the corner to the side street with the car, I saw it, and my heart sank. The van, horribly parked half on and half off the sidewalk, back door slightly open. Upon seeing this, I turned around and saw Van Man was now walking towards us. He said something that confused me at first, but immediately made sense after. He called out, "Hey, please just watch my car." This confused me. When he said that though, 4 men sat up from leaning on the wall next to it and began to follow us. My friends and I were slightly ahead of them, so we were trying to discuss the game plan. It was obvious if we did nothing, something horrible was going to happen. My friends started walking faster, and I remained at the same speed, frantically searching for my car keys, all while shouting at my friends to wait up and asking what the rush was. This was all in hopes that the guys behind us who were gaining on us were oblivious to us knowing they had sinister intentions. As soon as the car came into view, we booked it. We jumped in and drove away, but we were only seconds away from being not that lucky. After locking the car doors, I saw the 4 men surrounding the car. I managed to get us out of this, but looking back in the mirror, I saw a 5th man by the van at the bottom of the street. I still have no idea what their intentions were that night, if it was to rob us, beat us up, or worse. I don't really like to think about how lucky we were that night. I ask that when you're out, no matter how innocent an interaction with someone can seem, always pay attention to the little things. When I was 18, I worked at my college's residence building at the front desk. I think I almost got assaulted or murdered. You be the judge. During the summer, the building operated as a hotel, so 2.5 floors were hotel rooms, and half of the 3rd floor were student dorms. The whole building operated with this hotel swipe key system that was pretty outdated, honestly. All the doors were powered by 4 AA batteries. If the batteries died, there was a decently lengthy process to replace them and reprogram the door. A dark-haired guy came to the front desk from inside the building while I was working an overnight shift at around 1 or 2 a.m. He told me he'd left his key card in his room. I made him a new one and made my first error of the night. A hotel guest could have as many room keys remade as they wanted, hypothetically at least. Students, however, were supposed to be given a temporary keycard and charged $2 to be returned when theirs was located. I gave him a new key for his room and asked if he was a student or a hotel guest. He replied immediately, "Student." At this point, I should have checked our system to charge his account, but I was caught up in doing administrative duties and I forgot to do it in the moment. I used to trust people way too easily at this job, but after this, I quickly learned not to. Later on that night, maybe around 3 or 4 a.m., he came back to the desk again and said he could not get into his room. I asked if he'd just forgotten his key again. He said no, the door was not working. I asked if the light was coming on when he swiped his card. He said no, so I figured the batteries were probably just dead. I told him I'd have to change the batteries and went up to his room with him. He asked for my name, and I told him. He never told me his. I opened the room door manually with a master key and told him I'd have to prop it open while I worked on the back panel to replace the batteries. No, it's okay, I'll close it, he said, and closed and deadbolted the door. It was a really weird interaction, but I tried not to think too much about it. I had changed the batteries on plenty of other doors by this point, and some students were iffy about having their doors propped open for their room to be on display for anyone walking by. The man also had this really thick accent. I thought he might be an international student, since we had lots of students from other countries where English was not their first language. I gave him the benefit of the doubt in that moment and thought maybe it was just a language barrier issue. At this point, though, I was starting to feel like something was really wrong. I tried to ignore it so I didn't freak him out too much. While I was there trying to focus on fixing the door as quickly as possible, he kept trying to coax me to go further into the room, saying his bed was broken and he needed me to take a look at it. there was something underneath that needed to be fixed, etc. He held out this little gold house key and said, "I have a key, go get it," and threw it under the bed. He also said there was a leak under the fridge. He just kept trying to get me down on the ground, throwing random problems at me. Obviously, I told him no to all of these. I told him I'd send maintenance in the morning to take a look at it if anything was truly broken. I had my back to him at this point, and he asked me if I would take off my glasses. I told him no and that I needed them to see. His tone of voice immediately changed. In the most steady, chilling manner, he said, "Ella, it's okay. You can take them off." From behind me, he reached around and tried to take off my glasses. I swatted his hand away and tried to remain calm. Even though he was creeping me the fuck out, I didn't want to be rude to him, and I still had to do my job anyway. I didn't want to get in trouble if he complained about me, or risk upsetting him and having him yell at me or something. I got up to grab something from the door repair kit and undid the door deadbolt. I opened it up in the process. He jumped toward the door to close it once again and told me to keep it closed. I told him no, I had to open it to start reprogramming it from the front. While I held the door open with my foot and grabbed something from the door repair kit, he started playing with the little wispy hairs at the top of my forehead and trying to touch my shoulder. I swatted him away again and asked him not to touch me, and focused on just getting the fuck out of there. He once again tried getting me to follow him into the room. I went as far as the door frame to see if I could actually spot any problems with his room. That's when I realized that he had nothing in his room. No dishes in the kitchen, no shower curtain in the bathroom, no sheets on the bed, nothing. This wasn't his room. My brain once again went back to the international student theory, thinking he might have just arrived today and hadn't gotten a chance to buy anything yet. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong. I fiddled around with the door for a few more seconds before announcing that it was fixed, and quickly gathered the door kit and left. Before I had even reached the elevator, he came back out without his shoes on to follow me. He tried to get back in to get his shoes, and called out, "Ella, the door isn't fixed. You need to come back right now." I went back and opened the door manually. I told him if the door was broken, I'd have to send up maintenance to fix it in the morning. I already knew he was going to follow me to the elevator again, so I closed the door behind me once he went inside, and ran down the stairwell as fast as I could. When I got to the front desk, I immediately checked the computer and saw the room he was supposed to be in was empty. It wasn't a student room or a hotel room. I locked myself in our back office and called campus security. He came down a few minutes later and walked behind the desk. I yelled at him to get on the other side and wait, now that I knew he wasn't a resident. He tore the corner off a slip of paper I had sitting on the desk and drew a flower on it. When security arrived, he ran back up to the empty room and tried convincing them he lived there so he wouldn't have to leave. He kept showing them his key, which had decided to work on the door again somehow. They escorted him back downstairs and came to ask me if he really did live there. Obviously, he fucking didn't. That's why I called you guys crying and terrified. He kept interjecting to argue that he did live there, but couldn't even recall his room number when asked. Security asked him for a student card, and he couldn't produce it, so they told him he would have to leave if he couldn't prove he lived there. While they were grabbing his information, I listened from the office and could immediately tell he was lying. The phone number he gave was just a bunch of random numbers off the top of his head. The name he gave was prefixed by a long as if he was trying to think of one on the spot. When they asked him for his address, he said just across the street. The security guard asked him if he lived in the apartments across the street. He said yes, but couldn't tell them what the building number was. Eventually, he said the number was 1200, but I moved into that building a few months later, and that apartment does not exist. When security asked what his purpose was to be sneaking into a room, he just kept the ums and uhs and saying he didn't know. As they further questioned him, he just kept fidgeting and started saying, "I don't know, no reason, I was just here." At one point, he even tried to tell them he was my friend, at which point I poked my head out of the office to say I'd literally never seen him before that night. He left. We didn't call the police because he didn't actually do anything, but it was still fucking unsettling. Later on, it dawned on me how he figured out that room was vacant. One of the housekeepers had been using it as her personal break room. A few days later, a housekeeper came to the desk and told me they found the door dead-bolted open, the TV on, and a housekeeper inside watching TV. She must have forgotten to close the door when she left for the night, and when the creep let himself into the building, he found that empty room. I never saw him again, and to this day I have no clue what he was doing there. I haven't worked there since last winter, and overnight shifts still give me the heebie-jeebies. This is a story that happened to me when I was in college, around 19 or 20. Some details are a little bit fuzzy, as it's been over a decade now, but I'll do my best to recount it as accurately as possible. It's also relevant to mention I have always looked very young for my age, to the point where someone asked if I was lost and looking for my mom once when I was at the bank depositing a check as a 20-year-old. Anyone passing me on the street at the time likely thought I was a preteen or young teen. I'm also very small and short. In general, I just look like an easy target, and like someone who wouldn't be able to put up a good fight. It was the middle of the afternoon, and I was home from college for the weekend, driving home from an auto shop having just picked up my car after some repairs. It suddenly started making a loud grinding noise. This car was very old, so things were always going wrong with it. I pulled into a shopping center parking lot and called my parents for advice on whether I should take it back to the shop or get a tow. I knew very little about cars. My mom told me she would come meet me at the shopping center and we'd figure it out together. At this point, my phone battery was also dying, so I shut my phone off after that call. As I was hanging out in the parking lot, a guy pulled over on the street in front of me, rolled down his window, and asked me for directions. I did my best to direct him, but instead of taking off, he then pulled into the parking lot and got out of the car. I remember thinking that was weird, but like many young women, I'd been socially conditioned to be nice and helpful, so I ignored the slight alarm that was going off inside my head. After all, it was broad daylight in the middle of a shopping center. Cars were driving by constantly. It's not like it was nighttime in the middle of an abandoned alley or something. The guy started to make what seemed like small talk, and I complied, not understanding what he wanted. He introduced himself, asked my name. I offered him my first name. He asked what I did. I said I was a student studying art. He asked where I went to school, and I told him. He asked how old I was. Then he asked my sign. I should note that my mom was very into astrology at the time, so this didn't strike me as a weird question. She was always asking people for their birth date and time and offering to do their charts and whatnot. I told him my sign, and he replied, "Oh, no way, me too. My birthday is X. When is yours?" I foolishly told him, again thinking this guy was just really into astrology like my mom. He made a little more small talk, and then, I guess seeing that I was a bit more relaxed, he said he was a sculptor, that if I was interested in art, I'd love the sculptures he had at his home. He said we could go there right now and look at them. Immediately, that dull alarm in the back of my head got turned way up. I was young and naive, but I knew never to get into a stranger's car and immediately felt uncomfortable. Keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, I looked extremely young, though he knew how old I was at this point. I started to put two and two together. He was getting increasingly more insistent that I get in his car and go to his house right now. He reached for my arm, and at that point everything is a blur. I yelled that I had to go, and ran from my own car into the nearest store. It was this tiny game store, so there wasn't really anywhere to hide. I told the cashier about the guy though, and asked if I could wait in there until my mom showed up. The cashier kindly assured me the man would not be let into the store, and that he and his coworker would keep an eye on me until the man was gone. I also asked them if I could use their phone to call my mom and let her know what was going on since mine had died. I kept watching the guy outside by my car, worried he would try to come in, but as soon as he saw me use the store's phone, he jumped in his car and bolted off. I wish the story ended there. That whole encounter got me really shook up. but as I reflected on it, I realized, through the questions the man had asked, he had my first name, the exact birth date, and he also knew where I went to school. I asked a friend of mine what kind of info he could get based on what he had, and much to my distress, my friend showed me he was able to find out my full name, my phone number, and my home address with the info I had given the man. I felt like such an idiot. I had always been taught to be wary of strangers and not give them personal info. I was baffled by how easily this guy had gotten this info out of me just by pretending to have casual conversation. Nothing happened for a few weeks, and I started to stress less. I stopped thinking about the encounter and stopped worrying about running into the man again. Then one early morning, my cell phone rang. The number was restricted, a caller ID block. I answered. There was heavy breathing on the phone, but no reply. I hung up. It happened again the next morning. This time a man answered. "What are you doing right now?" he said. "I was trying to sleep." "What are you wearing?" I immediately hung up. The calls continued though. The next time I picked up, I told him if he called again, I'd call the police. I got a few more calls from a restricted number after that, but I stopped answering, and eventually they stopped altogether. I'm not entirely sure if the calls were from the man I met in the parking lot, but it seems pretty likely. It was just too much of a coincidence that they started right after that encounter. I spent a good year of being afraid of that man, and the memory still gives me chills when I think about it over a decade later. I've had plenty of encounters with creeps on the street, but none of them scared me as much as this, and none that I felt came close to actual danger as this either. I still can't believe how foolish I was giving him info about myself so easily. It was an important lesson in how smooth and sneaky creeps can be, and now I'm much more careful about what I say to strangers. I don't know what he had planned if I'd been foolish enough to actually get into his car with all those people around, but I'm glad that I never had to find out. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the content of this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide you like my content enough to subscribe, please be sure to hit the bell button right next to the subscribe button and turn notifications to all so you can be notified of every video I post in the future. If you don't feel like doing that though, I post a video nearly every day, so you can just come back every now and then and check up on what you missed. If you guys have any criticisms on what I can do better or any feedback on the stories in the video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I always enjoy reading all the comments and I try to give them hearts and respond when I can. If you guys would like to reach me for any reason, or you would like to send in a story to be read, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You'll find a link to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Last but not least, I also run two other channels, Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour, where I do true crime videos and dark documentaries respectively. If that kind of content sounds interesting to you, why not go ahead and check it out and see if it is for you. Aside from that though guys, I think that's pretty much it for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.